Everybody always wants the latest technology. In the modern era, none of us can wait to get our hands on the latest iPhone, smart TV, or video game console. People in ancient times were just as enthusiastic about technology as we are. Technology they got excited about may have looked and functioned very differently from the technology of today. But it was still amazing. And this video contains the proof. We begin with the archaeological artifact known simply as YBC 7289 into Babylonian clay tablet, and it's famous among historians because it contains an accurate sexagesimal approximation to the square root of 2. Impressively, the number is given to 6 decimal places. That makes the inscription on TBC 7289 the greatest example of computational accuracy ever discovered in the ancient world. Nobody knows who computed the calculation because they didn't sign their work, but it's thought to be the work of a student who was based in the south of Mesopotamia between 30,630,800 years ago. Whoever they were, they also inscribed a separate calculation on the reverse of the tablet. That may have been an attempt to work out the diagonal of a rectangle with 2 sides and a diagonal arranged in the ratio of 3, 4, and 5. Sadly, part of the calculation has been erased, so we have no idea whether or not they were correct. The existence of the tablet is considered to be evidence that the ancient Mesopotamians had access to a mathematical aid that we've never discovered. It's now in the Yale Babylonian collection. We could have chosen any one of hundreds of examples to illustrate our next piece of ancient technology. When we've chosen a bronze statue, it's around 5,700 years old, and it's a perfect example of an ancient process called lost wax casting. This technique is still used in the manufacture of metal objects in some parts of the world today. Evidence of the process is invisible to the naked eye, but can be detected by using modern technology to closely examine its microstructure. By doing that, we can prove that the object was made first by creating the shape out of wax and then encasing the wax model in clay and baking it. The wax melts during the baking process, leaving a cavity inside the clay that's filled with molten metal, and then the clay shell has broken off when the object is cool. Getting metal up to the required temperature would have been incredibly difficult almost 6,000 years ago. And yet, here's this statue to prove that someone in ancient Greece managed to do it. Countless amulets and pieces of jewelry were made the same way. The bullseye statues are rare. There's a beautiful old building in El Jedi to Morocco that in recent times has been both used as a warehouse and a movie set. It wasn't built for either of those purposes, though. This is the Portuguese sister Novela Juanita, the modern village of LGD. Anna is a holiday destination and has been ever since the Moroccans regained control of it in 1769. Prior to that, though, it had been occupied by the Portuguese for more than 250 years. The Portuguese army built the fortress of Macedon, many parts of which still exists today. You can still see the Christian churches, ramparts, synagogues and communal ovens of the fortress, but the sister Anne is the jewel in the crown. It's so picturesque that Orson Welles chose to use it in his version of Othello. The fact permission was granted for the sister and to be used in the movie was considered controversial even at the time, as it's a protected cultural heritage monument. It's thought that the cistern was built in 1514. Although it could be a few years either side of that. Even today, a thin layer of water exists on the floor and reflects the light of the room. Iron smelting is a dangerous process, even when it's carried out in blast furnaces today. It was arguably even more dangerous more than 1,000 years ago, unless you happen to live in Sri Lanka, or an ingenious new technique for iron smelting in either the 9th or 10th century. The Sri Lankans came up with a sort of forced drop shaft furnace effectively. It's an iron smelting facility powered by the wind. There are several such furnaces in and around some Mandala Waiwa, all of which are positioned on the western sides of hills and ridges, where they would often be exposed to high winds during monsoons. The regular wind wouldn't be strong enough to power these ingenious furnaces. But monsoon winds would be enough to produce high-quality high-carbon steel. Archaeological evidence at Salmonella will suggest that this was once the dominant industry in the region. It might have made a significant contribution to South Asia's early mastery of steel production. While we might have called it relatively safe a few moments ago, we must point out that people who worked at these furnaces would have had to stand outside during monsoons, so perhaps it wasn't so safe after all. It would be natural to assume that plastic surgery is the product of modern-age vanity. From lip fillers to Botox. Millions of people seem to be obsessed with the idea of making themselves more conventionally beautiful or remain looking young well into their 40s and 50s. However, there's nothing new about the concept of plastic surgery. Incredibly, it can be traced back to the India of 2,600 years ago. The first verifiable records of procedures that we today recognize as plastic surgery can be found in the writings of the Hindu author Schroeder, who was also a surgeon himself. His manuscripts contain instructions and theories regarding several 100 surgical procedures, including rhinoplasty. So his greatest work is known as the Sushruta Samhita and is thought to be the most important treatise on surgery to survive. From the ancient world. The Sushruta version of rhinoplasty involves reconstructing a damaged nose by using a flap of skin from the cheek. Several of the processes outlined in the text are so far ahead of Shruta's time that it's thought that rather than merely writing about him, he must have invented. Did our ancient ancestors bore precise holes into solid rock? The answer is by using devices like the bow drill. A standard bow drill doesn't look like a powerful tool. It's a basic hand-operated tool made of a spindle and a shaft set into motion by pushing a bow back and forth. The bow is attached to a top piece of cord, which is in turn wrapped around the spindle. The invention is sometimes known as the Egyptian bow drill owing to a belief that it's an ancient Egyptian invention. But solid evidence to support that theory is scam. Instead, it's more likely that bow drills were invented in America or Pakistan somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 years ago. Examples of bow drills made with green jasper drill bits have been recovered from the archaeological site there. However, ancient bow drills have also been found in lands formerly occupied by the Indus Valley Civilization, making it hard to say whether the concept began in one area before moving to another, or whether the invention is an example of parallel evolution. The bow drill eventually gave way to the pump drill, which was invented in Europe during the Roman period. Using techniques like these, our ancestors could cut gemstones. The ancient residents of Burkina Faso were light years ahead of their time when it came to metallurgy. That's why there are so many notable ancient ferrous metallurgy sites in the country, and also the reason that these areas are collectively listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. While obtaining a reliable scientific date for sites like these isn't easy. The oldest of the structures is thought to have been in situ since the year 800 BCE. The 5 metalworking centers recognized by UNESCO are in Kinderbo Kukui Tamani to Waga and Dora, across which there are ruins of 15 natural draft furnaces surrounded by smaller furnaces and the dwellings of the people who once worked here. The 5 sites were selected specifically because of the presence of these draft furnaces, which would have required nothing more than ambient airflow to operate. The areas around the furnaces are so rich in iron that the material is still extracted and worked in the regions to this day. But the use of the furnaces waned after Burkina Faso was invaded and colonized by the French at the end of the 19th century. Seen from above, this incredible invention and god about Iran looks like nothing more significant than a series of puckered holes in the ground. That's misleading. This is actually one huge interconnected structure called here is it's an ancient miracle of hydraulic engineering. It's one of the greatest surviving examples of an irrigation system known as a common form of water transportation technology that's still in use in some parts of the world today. Faced with life on a dry plain 3,000 years ago, the ancient Persians knew that the only way to survive was to make water come to them. And that's what the Kiraz does. The system is made up of underground tunnels that run on for miles, connecting wells to underground reservoirs. The holes visible from above provide ventilation to the tunnels and also provide access for water collection. Building just one average-sized planet would take many years as all the work was done with picks and shovels. Building something the size of Kiraz must have taken decades. Systems like this still exist in Libya, Turkmenistan, Iran and Afghanistan. The entire archaeological site of Site Uday in Peru is full of ancient wonders. But because of the existence of the marvelous, a hoot, a monolith, everything else almost gets forgotten about many centuries ago, so Uday was where the Inca people came. For ceremonial gatherings and religious festivals. During those occasions, they gave thanks to the water god. And we believe that water is what this huge day monolith is all about. What historians can agree on is how far that water connection goes. One theory is that it's just an elaborate sculpture carved with decorative channels that allow water to run across. Some experts believe it has a much more sophisticated purpose though. They believe it's a topographic mini replica of Sadute as it appeared at the time, and the monument is a sort of scale model city that they can use to plan and test irrigation systems. There certainly seems to be areas of the monolith that make sense as rivers and water tunnels. If this really was an irrigation testing device, the Inca may have been even more ahead of their time than we already believe. The first discoveries of strange spiral-shaped rock formations in the state of Nebraska, USA, were recorded during the mid-19th century. But nobody paid much attention to them until 1891, when geologist Dr. Barber was asked to inspect a 9-foot-long example of the phenomenon with his own eyes. As a geologist, he was baffled by its composition. The center of the tube was filled with sand, and the walls were made of a white material he couldn't identify. As he didn't have any better ideas, he officially named the structure Dama Nolans, which was taken from the name that local ranchers had already given them. The ranchers called them devil's corkscrews. Barber eventually took the step of cutting some of the corkscrews open and found Rodin bones inside them, which confused him further. Today, the official explanation is these are the burrows of a now extinct relative of the beaver known as the Paleocastor, which lived and died 22 million years ago. And that digging them in spiral shapes defended them from predators. It's an interesting theory, but it lacks solid evidence. Were these corkscrews carved by human hands? If so, how? Why? The line of technological advancements that ended with the creation of the computer started with the invention of the advocates. If we accept that statement as fact, then we can consider this tiny Chinese abacus ring the world's first piece of wearable technology. The impressive piece of practical jewelry was made about 300 years ago during the Chinese Qing dynasty. The device is square and only half an inch tall, and why you need to carry a very small pan around with you to get any practical use out of it, simply too small and delicate to be operated with fingers. These rings were called zusak and were used by traders and market stall owners to quickly calculate prices on the spot so they can agree on purchases or sales. Unfortunately, history doesn't tell us when the first Dusan was made or who came up with the concept. Whoever that person was, they came up with an on-the-spot mathematical aid that wouldn't be bettered until the invention of the electronic calculator in the 1960s. In 2003, a pilot called Johan Heine lost control of his plane in the skies of South Africa and crashed down to earth in Mpumalanga. His first piece of good fortune is that he survived the crash. The second piece of good luck is that he discovered Adam's calendar, which had somehow sat undiscovered on the plains there for thousands of years. The large dolomite stone circle, which has a diameter of almost exactly 100 feet, appears to have been arranged to align with the patterns of the stars in the sky as they would have looked more than 8,000 years ago, long before the famous stone circle of Stonehenge in England was assembled. In fact, according to historian Michael Tellander, they might even be more than 12,000 years old. If they are, they're the oldest known human-made structures ever discovered. Yet we don't know who made them. For all we know, they were left behind for us to find by an advanced ancient civilization, and we don't even know their name. That's the point of archaeology though, to carry on searching until we know more. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.